بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين أجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. We reached a very important part of the course, and after some introductory discussions, we talked about Ayatollah Misbah's account of the basis of human knowledge, how we can justify reliability of our knowledge. And as you remember, I told you from lessons 11 to 20 of آموزش فلسفه, philosophical instructions, he discusses theory of knowledge or epistemology, and our discussion last week was about lesson 19. Alhamdulillah, the book is translated to English, and I saw that the text was also shared in the group. If anyone cannot get access to the text, you can let me know. I have also found it online. I can share, but I think it was put in the group also by others. Today, inshallah, we will try to complete his discussion, and then inshallah I will also refer in following weeks to Allama Tabataba'i's discussion about theory of knowledge in Usul Falsafe wa Ravish Realism, and then inshallah we will try to have the concluding inshallah remarks after that. خب, in lesson 19 of آموزش فلسفه, which is just penultimate lesson for the section on معرفت شناسی or theory of knowledge, he first introduces the topic, and what is the main topic? He refers to different theories about truth, and then he says تحقیق در مسئله, and that is where he wants to explain his own view. According to what I have, I give you page number also. It's volume 1, page 236, but you may have different editions. So we said that the problem is about tasdiqat, not about ilm huzuri, not even about tasawwurat in ilm husuli. Yeah, because ilm husuli is either tasawwur or tasdiq, conception or proposition. It's about tasdiqat. In order to find a way to verify and justify our tasdiqat, then he said we need to look for somewhere that we have ishraf, we have supervision, we can supersee everything. Because if something is inside us and has to correspond to something outside us, then there is a gap. We need to fill this gap. And here lots of questions come. How you are sure about what is outside? But if we can find somewhere that although it is ilm husuli, not ilm huzuri we have no problem. Although it's ilm husuli and it is tasdiq, we can have ability to check both sides, what is corresponding to and what is corresponded to. He started with what we call in logic al-qadaya al-wajdaniyya, wajdaniyat. These are husuli, these are propositions, but rooted in our inner experiences and inner feelings. For example, when I am feeling, very fearful, understanding of that feeling is ilm huzuri. But putting it into a proposition and say, I am fearful, or I was fearful, even after it stopped, can be backed up by ilm huzuri. Of course, if you go to interpretations, we said no. If you go too, far from your ilm huzuri, then it will be subject to mistakes. But direct translation, if you call it, direct translation of what is known by ilm huzuri into ilm husuli, this is wajdaniyat. It's one of the badihiyat, and it's very reliable because we can see both sides and we can check ourselves. I can see whether I have fear or I don't have fear. Then we said the same or similar ishraf, being in a high position to supervise, to supersede, can be found in logical propositions. Qazayay mantiqiyya, al-qadaya al-mantiqiyya, we can find there as well. Because they are related to concepts, and these concepts are in our mind. Not only as kayf nafsani, even concepts which are about outside things are inside us. No, even what they relay, that aspect that they are relaying and they are doing hikayah, that is also inside us. Okay? For example, when we say mafhumul insani kulliyun, the concept of human being is in our mind. To be kulli, to be universal, is also in mind, and we can assess. You can examine the concept of human being in your mind and check, is it kulli or is it juz'i? You say, no, it's kulli, it's universal. So we said for wajdaniyat, then we have no problem. For the logical propositions also we have no problem. What else? Then we said for awwaliyat, one type of badihiyat is awwaliyat, and they are very important, and they can serve as the basis for even empirical propositions, what we can understand through senses, perception, etc., experience. So he says, let us reflect more on this kind of proposition. We need to reflect on mawzu, subject, and mahmul, predicate. Where do these subjects come from? He says, an earlier lesson, lesson 17, we explained that in awwaliyat the subjects are philosophical concepts such as haja, need, istiqlal, independence, illat, cause, ma'lul, effect. These concepts, which are very important as they occur as subjects, we can understand them in our mind, because philosophical concepts, or if you want to be more precise, philosophical secondary intelligibles, al-ma'qulat al-thaniyat al-falsafiyya, these are concepts which are abstracted by our mind. Mind, by reflecting on beings, can abstract, can do intizar of these concepts. Mind doesn't need to reflect on external beings. Mind can reflect on internal beings and abstract these concepts, and in this way can be immune with respect to mistakes and illusions, confusions. For example, you can reflect on an external effect, al-ma'lul al-khariji, and say this depends on its cause. For example, we have light here outside. This light cannot exist by itself, and it depends on sun, for example. But I can also reflect on ma'lul, which is inside me. For example, my will, my irada. My irada depends on me. If I want to make irada, then there is irada. If I don't want to make it, then there is no irada. So I can examine the relation between effect and cause and abstract relevant concepts inside, where I have ilm huzuri, where I can check things by myself. What about the other aspect? This was about mawdu, about subjects. What about the other aspect? How can you say that this predicate is united with this subject? There is ittihad, some kind of ittihad between mawdu and mahmul. Because in any haml, in any statement, you need some kind of unity between subject and predicate. Either ittihad is in mafhum, like hamla awwali, or ittihad is in wujud, like hamla shayya sanai. So how can we say there is some kind of unity between the predicate and subject? Ayatollah Misbah says, when you say har ma'luli ihtiyaj bi illat darat, every effect needs cause. We said the concept of ma'lul came to our mind by reflection on something inside us, okay, like irada. What about every ma'lul needs illah? What about this, to be in need of illah? He says this is tahlili. If you analyze ma'lul, you realize that ma'lul needs illah. Ma'lul cannot be ma'lul unless there is illah. Ma'lul means shay'un lahu illah, shay'un yahtaj ila al-illah. So he says it goes back to awwaliyat, because this awwaliyat goes back to tahliliyah. It's awwaliyat because tasawwur al-mawdu' al-mahmul kafin ila tasdiq, just imagining, conceiving subject and predicate is enough. Why? Because predicate comes out of subject, is tahlili. One of the things that inshallah we have to discuss later is that maybe it doesn't need to be tahlili. If it is tahlili, it's of course very easy, but if we can show that even there can be synthetic, ta'alifi, tarkibi propositions that we can understand, but with the help of ilm huzuri, I think that's making us much richer, makes our hands much open. If we can find قضایای تعلیفی ما تقدم, تعلیفی ما تقدم means doesn't need experience. If it is ta'akhar, it's a posteriori, then it becomes subject to all the problems that tajriba has. But if it is ma taqaddam, a priori, then it's better. Inshallah, we'll discuss it later. But his explanation is this. He says that we can understand the relation between ma'lul and need for illah inside us. His exact wording is this. He says, پس مفهوم احتیاج به علت در مفهوم معلول مندرج است. So the concept of need for cause is inside the concept of effect معلول و اتحاد آنها را با تجربه درون ذهنی میابیم. And we find unity between ma'lul and need for illah with the help of tajrubah darun zihni, a kind of experience which is inside our mind. We don't need to go outside. As I said, you can reflect on a ma'lul inside you like irada and see that it's in need of cause. It cannot be created by itself, or be self-existent, self-subsistent. But if someone says kullu mawjudin muhtajun ila al-illah, instead of saying kullu ma'lulin, if someone says kullu mawjudin, every being needs illah, we say no. In my mind, I don't see unity between being and need. Because maybe mawjud is wajib. I cannot accept that every being needs illah. I can say every ma'lul needs illah, or every mumkin needs illah, not every mawjud. Therefore, we cannot consider kullu ma'lulin, kullu mawjudan muhtaj illah as badihi, or as even a true proposition. So he says بدیهیات اولیه هم منتهی به علم حضوری می شوند. So in this way بدیهیات اولیه are going back to knowledge by presence, and therefore they are also supported, they are backed up. But a question may arise. What we find by knowledge, by presence, ilm huzuri, is a particular ma'lul shakhsi, a particular individual case. You find that my irada depended on me. It couldn't exist before me deciding and making this irada. But what about every ma'lul? How you can say every ma'lul is like this? How can you consider a statement with its generality, kullu ma'lulin? How can you find this badihi? The answer is that although my mind is reflecting on a particular ma'lul, which is my irada, but particularities of this case are not relevant. Mind has ability to look at something which has lots of particularities, but leave them aside and say, my judgment about irada being in need of illah is not because it is my irada or your irada or irada today or irada, I don't know, of this object, I can set aside all these particularities. Even being irada is not important. I can realize that this is something for every ma'lul, every effect. So, as I said last week, we can reach mistaq bizat. We can reach a point that is just ma'lul and nothing else. You may say, ma'lul and nothing else doesn't exist. I say, I know. Anything that comes to existence comes with, thousands or millions of particularities. But human mind has this ability to set aside all these irrelevant particularities and say, ma'lul as such, kullu ma'lulin kama huwa ma'lul. Even irada here as ma'lul, not as irada, not as my irada, not as irada of this thing, nothing. Just ma'lul, irada bima huwa ma'lul, yahtaj ila illa. So this is the ability of human mind, and I have said many times to people that we studied together philosophy, in falsafe muqaddamati, bidayatul hikmah, etc., sharh manzumah. We said that one of the important aspects of philosophy is to master functions of human mind. Human mind is very, very sophisticated, very capable. Even our mind can reflect on our mind, because mind has different layers. In a higher level, I mean by higher, more, having more ability to supervise. Because sometimes we say higher, like for example, higher floor in the building. Higher floor in the building is not the floor which is more important, because it depends on lower floors. Yeah, but when I say higher, means higher as ability to supervise. So mind has ability even to check itself, to supervise its own functions. Take a distance and look at, for example, you make a judgment, then your mind takes distance and checks the same judgment that it has made and say this is not correct judgment, because there is problem in the form of reasoning or the materials and premises which are used for reasoning. So human mind has this ability. So mind can reflect on something particular in me, but leave aside all the particularities and say, as a case of ma'lul, as such, I am judging about this that it needs illa, and therefore it would be correct about every ma'lul. So he says, natija anke راز خطا ناپذیری بدیهیات اولیه اتکای آنها بر علم حضوری است. So the secret that why بدیهیات اولیه are not fallible, they are خطا ناپذیر, they are not fallible, means they are somehow infallible, they're immune. The secret for them being immune is that they depend on ilm huduri. Ilm huduri is certain, is yaqini. Ilm huduri is definitely true. This also depends on ilm huduri, not on any wasite, any medium. Then he says, ملاک صدق و کذب قضایا. What is the criterion for truth or falsehood of proposition? So he says, based on what we said, قضایای بدیهی self-evident propositions like اولiyat and وجدانیات, they are certain. And the reason for being certain is because the relation between subject and predicate can be verified by ilm huzuri or through ilm huzuri. Now, for nazariyat, speculative propositions, you need to make sure that you follow logic. If you can show that this proposition is derived from one of badihiyat which we have established, then that becomes also certain. Although it is not badihi, but it is certain. You have to follow the laws and rules of logic. If there is true proposition or premises, if there are true premises like suqra and kubra, they are by themselves correct, and the form of the reasoning, the form of the this deduction qiyas is also correct according to mantiq, you would have certain conclusion. Natija would be yaqini. So they have to go back to this. Now he says a question, an objection may arise here. And this leads us to the discussion about nafsul amr. Someone may say that according to the definition that we preferred for truth, we said truth is a kind of knowledge, which a kind of understanding which corresponds to reality. Therefore, you have to compare it with the reality. But the person who makes this objection says, but metaphysical propositions are not in possession of waqiyat ayni. There is no objective external reality against which we can check them. Where are the things outside that we can check philosophical proposition against? So some people have said then these are not only not true, they said because we cannot establish truth or falsehood for them, they are meaningless, they are absurd. Remember we said neo-positivists or logical positivists, they say metaphysical propositions are absurd, not false only. They say they don't even reach the point of discussing whether they are true or false. They have no meaning. Why? Because there's no way to verify them. Of course, we don't accept this. We say even something cannot be verified, can it still be meaningful? But they say no, when something cannot be verified empirically, it has no meaning. So, for them, reality is just empirical, and empirical is just for something which is material, which is physical. But philosophers say that realities are not only material or physical. We have immaterial, we have mujarradat, we have immaterial beings that actually, according to philosophers, they have stronger degrees of existence. They are much higher than those things that can be perceived. Not to be perceived by our eyes or ears, for example, is not weakness. It can be because actually they are too great to be understood by us as perception. Secondly, when we say they have to correspond to the reality, it is more general than finding something outside and pointing at it and say it has to match this. For example, when I talk about a person, okay, you can look at outside, say this is the person that we are talking about. Ma bihil iza is something which is visible easily. But propositions have different types of ma bihil iza, different types of realities against which we have to understand. Sometimes it can be an external thing. Sometimes it can be something in our own mind. A level of our mind can be something that they have to match. So for this reason, he discusses the concept of nafsul amr. Alhamdulillah, we discussed this in Bidayatul Hikmah and some other places. Nafsul amr is a notion that Muslim philosophers have introduced to replace just external, beings. Because if some realities, if someone says it has to match external reality, then it would not be comprehensive. They try to come up with a notion which is more general and can include all kinds of truth. If this truth is empirical, it's logical, it's philosophical, it's about different disciplines, all can be included if we use nafsul amr. But then what do they mean by nafsul amr? So there have been different attempts to explain what is nafsul amr. Some people even thought amr here is something mujarrad, something immaterial, and everything has to be checked against that. We have Allah lahul khalq wal amr. So Mullah Sadra says there are two types of creatures. Material ones, which are referred to as alam khalq, and immaterial ones, which are related to as alam amr. They only depend on Allah's command, kun fayakun. Ayatollah Masbah says, no, nafsul amr is not about this. It's not that we have a mujarrad being, immaterial being, against which we have to check, and that is the ma bihil izza for every reality. No. Some people said nafsul amr is ash-shay fi nafsih. This is also ambiguous. What does it mean, ash-shay fi nafsih? It's not helping that much. We say everything has to be checked with itself. What does it mean? What is meant by Muslim philosophers when they say nafsul amr is that for every reality, for every fact, every truth, you have to find its relevant realm. Zarf subut. Zarf subut. There is a relevant realm that it's true there. It's existing there. For something, it can be external world, like a rose flower, water, soil. The realm of their occurrence, zarf tahaqquq, is external being. For something can be only mind, like logical realities. For something can be mind and outside, like معقولات ثانية فلسفي, like معلول, كل معلول يحتاج إلى. It's true about realities inside, realities outside, but don't expect to be able to point at something and say this is illiya or ma'luliya, because this is معقول ثاني. It's not معقول أولى. It's not mahuvi. You cannot point at it. As we say in philosophy, ma bihil ittisaf is fil kharij. Ma bihil intiza is fil dhin. So we can use this for something even external, but it's inside zihn that we can abstract these concepts. So for all kinds of prepositions, whether it is about mahwi or ma'qul thaniya mantiqi or falsafi, there is a realm for that particular type of reality that our mind can have access to. For those which are outside, access is ma'al wasita, in the external world. But for those which are inside or are both inside and outside, we can check them through our own reflections, and we can find the reality through ilm huzuri and then expand it. So the summary of this lesson is this, lesson 19. Number one, to have a kind of real or true understanding, it's a matter of correspondence to the reality that this true statement is referring to. Number two, for rationalists, the criterion for recognizing truth is fitrat aql. Means our aql is made in the way that understand these things and then build upon these badihiyat other things. But we said this needs more explanation, because someone may say, okay, your aql could be made differently. So we have to say why we cannot understand in another way. Then we said for empiricists, the criterion for truth is empirical experience. But we said this cannot be a solid and firm foundation, because we need to check these empirical data, and they are not by themselves badihi, self-evident. They need support. Number four, vejdaniyat, we said, have 100% value because they depend on ilm huzuri, and we can understand correspondence with reality inside. Number five, logical propositions also have value because we can understand through tajrubeh darun zihni, with our internal experience. Number six, subjects that are in self-evident propositions are ma'qulat thaniya, and they can be understood directly or indirectly through knowledge by presence. For understanding unity between or relation between predicate and subject, then here the key is tahleel. By analyzing mawzu or subject, like ma'lul, you see that ma'lul is in need of illah. But if, for example, some says wujud, we say I analyze wujud, and in wujud I don't see need for illah. Wujud can be wajib, can be mumkin. Wajib doesn't have need for illah. Then number seven, the reality that true propositions should correspond to and should match can be material, can be immaterial, can be external, and can be mental. 8, what we mean by nafsul amr is the same thing that propositions refer to or correspond to or try to report, mahkiya qadaya, and it can be different. For empirical knowledge, nafsul amr is external world, but for vejdaniyat it's inside. For logical proposition is inside. Or for the things which are in metaphysics used, again can be checked inside, although they are true also for outside. So, Alhamdulillah, lesson 19 finished. Please also read lesson, let me tell you which lesson is this. lesson lesson 18 is also very useful for you. Lesson 18 we have already discussed, but if someone wants to expand more, lesson 18 is also very good, because it is about the role of intellect and perception in statements, in tasdiqat. This is also a very good lesson. If you cannot read all the 10 lessons, at least lesson 18 and lesson 19. So basically he explains here the same thing that we have been discussing, what type of propositions we have, and to show that for reaching certain knowledge, aql has ability to work without relying on hiss. In tasawwurat, no problem. That's before this. But in tasdiqat, it's not that unless we use our hiss, our perceptions and senses, or we cannot have any proposition. No, he tries to show that there are, wajdaniyat, awwaliyat, logical things that can be understood without help of tajribah for affirmation. For tasawwur, no problem. Tajribah can be useful for reaching tasawwurat. But for tasdiq, we can have independent judgment of aql. So please read this as well. Inshallah, for the next session, we will refer to some of the ideas of Allama Tabatabai Rizwanullah Ta'ala Alayh from Usul Falsafe wa Ravish Realism. Do you have any questions, any comments?
No, thank you, teacher.
You're welcome. Okay. So, inshallah, see you bi'iznillah next week. التماس دعاء.